what was that time frame like vetting from when you guys decided, okay, we're probably going to be partnering with private equity? You have these 20 offers. How long did you look at things? What was that vetting process
Yeah, so
like?
that process takes almost close to a year. Because you start thinking about it, you may go ahead and bring on an investment banker, and then that banker will go ahead and try to work towards getting all your numbers in place. So it takes a lot of work to do that. Then you may go ahead and have these offers that come through. You have to go through those offers. Then you have management presentation where they come down. You have to have different dinners. We had met with 10 different groups, kind of sit down, discuss, and you got to figure out, well, which ones we want to go down. So they narrowed it down to three potential individuals, have future meetings with them. So it's a long time, arduous process, but I will say it's extremely critical that you go through that process, because it's only then do you realize, because when you go through it for the first time, and all of us will maybe only do this once, you don't realize how many aspects there are to this whole thing. But I think that the only reason why we're as happy as we are at this stage is because we did take our time to go through it. It's not something that you can rush through at all.
The past 3, 4, 5 years, we have seen an explosion of private equity in ophthalmology, and we're seeing it in other areas of medicine as well. I think dermatology and emergency medicine are seeing this dynamic take place as well. From my understanding, there was a similar dynamic, was it back in the 80s, early 90s, with it wasn't quite private equity, it was called something else, but a similar sort of concept. And then that ultimately kind of failed and fizzled out. Do you see private equity continuing to grow? Where do you see things headed?
Yeah, I think what happened back in the 80s is very different than what's happening over here at PE, in the sense that there they really didn't give actual cash. They basically give stock options, things like that could potentially go down to zero. Here there's actual equity, and the PE model, not just in ophthalmology, but if you understand PE, my son-in-law is in PE, and my son is in investment banking. And when you look at it not just from a medical perspective, but look at it from an overall industry perspective, you get a better, clearer understanding of how PE works in terms of trying to augment things and trying to improve upon things. So I don't think this is a short-term thing. I kind of view this as a long-term perspective. I don't view that all practice will be part of PE at some point in time. I think there will be a subset of patients, subset of practice that are part of PE. And in my mind, I mean, I think you've lived it yourself when this past year is, I really don't feel like being part of PE has really changed who we are or what we practice, things like that. We're still kind of doing the same thing. But I will say that it's very different from one person to another person as far as which practice you're with in that side of things.
I've seen multiple practices undergo that PE merger. In the sentiment, and maybe I'm just, my end is people who've had good positive experiences. The surgeons, the physicians tend to feel like not a whole lot has changed. And maybe with the backing of extra capital, they're able to maybe acquire more equipment, more technology, offer new procedures. But some of the sort of micro changes that maybe aren't as positive, I feel like I see in like the technicians or the staff. And a lot of that has to do with payroll and how things
Right.
are, all that stuff. So even though maybe we as surgeons are not affected by that realistically, like as heavily as some of the other people, there are those sort of changes in the system that are still shifting and taking place.
And I think you are right. I mean, there are definitely changes that do take place inside there. So I can't be blind towards that. There's definitely change inside there. I think one concept that a lot of people have is that PE comes in and a lot of people are basically fired. You're kind of reducing payroll, things of that nature. And I know in our experience, we've actually kept everyone that we had. We've actually increased the number of people that we had before. Now, change is one of those things that is sort of ongoing per se. And I think one of the toughest parts that we've had in the last 2 or 3 years is having COVID and the pandemic has created changes throughout the entire HR spectrum in general. If you look at most industries, all industries, I mean, are short in numbers of people and staff and things like that. I mean, it's been a very challenging time frame from a workforce perspective. So, but I mean, you are right that there will be some degree of change inside there. And I think you just have to look at the overall perspective in terms of, I, for one, feel like had I been the one that was completely on my own during COVID-19, I question whether we would have been as effective in terms of leading our practice through this difficulty as our being partnered up with PE.
Yeah, I mean, you guys kind of emerged stronger than ever, which it was interesting seeing when the pandemic first hit, how different practice environments, whether that was academics, small group private practice, large group private practice, multi-specialty group, or private equity backed practice, how they all responded. And academics probably lagged the most in terms of when are we going to start doing elective surgery
Right.
again, getting patients back into clinic. Um, and it seemed to be the multi-specialty groups or the private equity backed groups that opened their doors back. Maybe they had 4 to 6 to 8 weeks off, but then very quickly they were able to get back into things, implement certain processes to make sure that we're taking appropriate precautions to prevent spread of COVID, make sure everything is still sanitary and hygienic. And that was, I think, very practice and context situationally dependent.